So let's get right back into the thick of it with March. As I said last time, I'm going to go back to the idea of doing some master studies just so I can get a better understanding of different drawing techniques and especially studying anime and manga references. But this time, I've got a bit more experience with drawing facial features, which we saw last month. So I went online and found tons and tons and tons of character reference sheets. These are great for giving you a very clear and definitive look at a character and trying to see them from different angles, which helps you to practice the facial features in different proportions. So the main process that I'm using at the moment is to start off in pencil, drawing a circle, putting the facial features down quite roughly, and then going over in a bit more detail before finally inking it with these pens. A lot of these drawings are very rough and you can see mistakes in the original sketch layer and then even in its final layer with some of the proportions being off here. I tried experimenting with some variable line whips here, trying to draw emphasis to certain parts of the image, and I think this one turned out quite well. It's quite detailed, although some of the angles and lines don't quite match up with the original reference. So I tried to experiment a little bit here and incorporate both pencil shading and inking together into one image, and I didn't quite like how it turned out. I think I'm going to try and save some time and just stick with inking when it comes to this phase of the drawing. But now we're back to just pencil only. Now, one part of this exercise that was a bit of a surprise for me was how difficult it was to switch from one character to another, even within the same show. Now, this is one of the reasons why I keep switching between characters and shows. Because there's such a huge variety of art styles, it allows me to practice a much broader range of designs and not get too complacent as well. So even here within the same show, Alex and Ed have got a very different... So even with these pictures of Alex, I do really have to focus on the details of design and not just take what I've learned from drawing Ed and transfer it over, because his facial structure, his hands, his eyes, they're all so completely different. Next up we have a few pictures of Roy Mustang, and yeah, these weren't the best, especially with the chin and jaw. That is a sticking point for me. What this has allowed me to do is actually mix up the process in which I actually start a drawing. Now I've looked online at various guides and people have said, okay, start with the eyes, start with the nose, start with the face shape. But what I've done is I've experimented by trying a few different techniques to see what works best. However, it is a little bit frustrating when I'll start with, say, the eyes, for example, on one piece, and it'll turn out alright, and then I'll start with the eyes on another piece, and it won't come out that great. And switching over to another show entirely, we have some drawings of Spice and Wolf. Now these I actually really like, and it's probably the first drawings that I've done that I could say that I'm actually somewhat proud of. I'm still using the same techniques where I put a base layer down in pencil as a sketch, and then a draw over it. Now there's still a couple little tiny mistakes here and there, but I think they all came out really great. Since the drawings of the Wise Wolf are going so well, I decided to do two more. These ones are a little bit more complex in terms of clothing and detail, but again, I really liked how they turned out. So switching over to Soul Eater now, and on these I paid extra attention to the chins and jaws, making sure not to make them too large like I did with the Full Metal Alchemist ones, although I probably went too far the other way. I did a couple quick sketches of Maka here, deciding not to ink them just to save time, but I think they were okay. And now I switched over to Skate the Infinity. And it's a mixed bag, this one. I do like Reiki, but this image of Langer here is actually from a different piece entirely, and I didn't quite get the scaling right, so it's completely out of proportion. So jumping over to a different show again, we have Sailor Moon. I've heard stories of people like me who try and learn how to draw anime, but focus exclusively on drawing women, so that's something I'm trying to avoid early on. So next up we have this compilation of images from Mob Psycho 100. I stuck with just using pencil to speed things up, but it was mostly as an exercise of drawing facial proportions. And then on the next page we have, I've actually done something that many people fail to do, and finish a sketchbook. So what do I do now? So this sketchbook was graciously given to me by my partner. This sketchbook was stolen from my partner. I also took this opportunity to buy an extra pack of fine liners, just to give me a few more options when it comes to pen width. So here on the first page we have two drawings of Gallo from Promare. So you can see here that I'm really experimenting with the idea of having variable line widths and trying to draw emphasis as well by thickening certain areas. I've also tried to achieve that effect of where hair goes in front of a character's eye and it's overlaid in a certain colour, but doing it with ink by using a thinner tip. I actually think it came out quite well, so I'm going to continue doing that going forward. So sticking with Promare, we have these two of Gallo here. The eyes are a little bit off, especially on this one, and the chin is quite pointy. But I think overall it turned out quite well. So next up we have a couple from Howl's Moving Castle. I tried to experiment a little bit more with the depth of the hair as well, with the shading and how it interacts with the face. And I think overall the body and the hair turned out okay, but the face part didn't quite work out. So let's quickly move on from that. So I was getting quite used to the process at this point. You start off with pencil, you go over in pen, you thicken a few lines, you add some shading. However, something that I noticed is that these drawings were taking quite a while to do, sometimes up to an hour just for a single sketch. So in order to improve speed, I devised a new plan. The idea was that I'd ditch these pencils entirely, moving exclusively to using inking pens for all my drawings going forward. This to me was the equivalent of taking off the training wheels. Even though I wasn't using the eraser anymore, any errors could easily be overwritten using ink. So this is what I decided to do. This image of Mau Mau on the left is using my standard method: pencil, the 0.3 pen, and a 0.8 for some of the highlights and darker areas. So this one in the middle has no pencil layer whatsoever. I started off by doing a rough sketch in a 0.05 pen and then went over it in 0.3. And then this one on the right is only using the 0.3 pen. Now if you ask me objectively which one is the best, well, it's the one on the left, right, surely. And then this one on the right isn't that great. There's a lot of issues with the face and the proportions and the eyes. However, in terms of speed, this one was by far the quickest. So, my goal is to get something that looks like this, but only using this technique, sticking with the 0.3, drawing straight onto the paper, and then maybe using a 0.8 or a 1 pen just to kind of thicken out some of the edges. So I started off here with a few sketches of Gon from Hunter x Hunter, and sticking with ink exclusively, you can see the areas where I struggle on the most, but if anything, that just highlights where I need to focus on. So here on the left, the chin had to be redrawn several times, and even then I'd say it's still not quite right. He also looks like Lupin the Third for some reason. On this side profile, the chin jutted out too much originally, but the rest of it is generally okay. Up next we have some drawings of Killua as well, and I think these turned out a little bit better. Again, the chin and the cheeks here are still a little bit off, and there on the right as well. The eye here isn't fully in proportion, so I'll just redrew it down here as well to show you what it should look like. But I think overall this is a step up from the last one. So that's where we're going to finish off for March. I think I've learned a lot this month and kind of identified the areas that I need to focus on and improve. And I'm hoping that switching to only using these inking pens will help to accelerate that process as well. So thanks for sticking with me, and I'm excited to see what happens in April.